By them with something else. We have another speaker that's coming on. And she's got an amazing story, just like the rest of these ladies today, and you're here to hear it. Her name is Chloe Cole, and her story is called Transition. Curtains, please.
Hello, everybody. How are we all doing today? It's good to see you all. I actually just came in pretty late last night. I'm originally from the Central Valley. That's where I live today. And it was about an 8-hour drive, but I'm glad I was able to make it, and I'm glad that you all are here today. My name is Chloe Cole, and I am a 21-year-old detransitioner from the Central Valley, and an advocate for the civil rights of American children and families. My strongest belief is that every child matters. My second strongest belief is that no one person is irredeemable, no matter what they have lost or what kind of hardships they have faced in their lives. Through my own testimony, I became part of a movement that has impacted laws in 26 states and even abroad to protect children under the age of 18 from medical abuse and experimental sex change procedures. My ultimate goal is to get all 50 states and federally and every other country across the earth to change their laws to reflect reality and morality. After watching countless miracles happen in the last few years, not just in the law, but in our culture and in my own life as well, I believe with all my heart that protecting children is going to become the norm. There have been unconscionable abuses happening every single day in our hospital system, in our communities, to people my age, to children as young as 2 years old. The rights of mothers and fathers everywhere to stand up for their children are being attacked by radical medical professionals and organizations that follow the so-called gender-affirming care model. For far too long now, they have lied that they are the real advocates for the rights of our children. But the curtain has been lifted. It couldn't be any clearer now than ever that these people have been advocating for their own agenda that is anti-family and anti-Christ. It was doctors such as this who forfeited their oath to do no harm and led me astray, telling my 12-year-old self that I was brave for chasing a lie, for allowing adults to take a scalpel to my healthy body. I want to share the trials and tribulations that I went through, how I was saved by the grace of God, and connect with and embolden you all through my journey and my testimony. I went through, all things considered, a relatively ordinary childhood in the Valley. I was a bit of a tomboy. Especially the older I got, I just felt like, in terms of my personality, my sense of humor, my interests, I just connected so much better with the boys and the men in my life. Especially my brothers and my dad and my male cousins. I really looked up to them. They were role models for me who were strong, who were cool, who were funny, and I hope that one day I would end up just like them. And yes, I was raised in a loving home, but there were a few hiccups along the way. I was born with a birth defect that I had to get surgery a few times for. I was later diagnosed with a learning disability, and a lot of my struggles growing up were pathologized. Some rightly so. Some of it was a little exaggerated. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 7 years old and medicated for it very shortly afterward. Being regularly taken out of school for doctor's appointments and for surgeries, I was used to this idea that I was fundamentally different. And the way that I was treated for my differences seemed to confirm that. I was bullied at school throughout most of the years that I went to public school. So, not really knowing how to make friends and keep them in real life, I turned to the internet, as many children do, and as many people in my generation have. I started to make more friends online than I ever had in school, many of them through video game platforms and connecting through fan bases around my interests. Things like movies that I liked, cartoons that I watched, musicians who I listened to, my hobbies. And in these communities online, I started to notice a group of people who I had never heard of before. People who called themselves part of the LGBT. Many of them were young men and women who referred to themselves as gay or lesbian or bisexual. But what caught my interest the most was these other kids my age who identified as members of the opposite sex. The transgender boys and girls. And at first, it began as simple curiosity. What does it mean to be transgender? What are these people going through every day? And how do they get to a point where they made that decision to live an entirely different lifestyle? So I started to not only pay attention to their own personal testimonies and even personally connect with them a little bit. I related to them a lot. But I also, being raised by a nurse for a mother, already had a natural curiosity about the human body and about human psychology. So I even started to do a little bit more research on the side. And there were even resources from my own healthcare provider at the time that were pointing in the direction of affirmation for transgender people. I was learning ideas such as that gender and sex are two completely different things, that gender is separate from your body, that it's a sense of who you are internally, almost sort of like a soul. Some people would liken it to something that was immutable, a consequence of having a different brain structure or something genetic. And with how much I felt these kids' testimonies and their own feelings reflected my own, I wondered, why? Why does this speak to me so much? And I started to think, maybe I'm not just a tomboy. Maybe the reason why I'm being mistreated at school by both other students and by teachers and staff is because there really is something wrong with me. But what is that? I'd been asking myself that question for years, but when I stumbled upon this community and the more that I learned about it, everything just seemed to fall into place. It just clicked all at once. These girls called themselves tomboys too once upon a time. And they didn't like going through puberty. They didn't like their growing breasts and hips. They didn't like having long hair. They didn't like associating with anything feminine. I must be one of them. I too was never destined to be a young woman. I was a transgender young man this whole time. This is who I am. And at 12 years old, I decided that I no longer was my mom and dad's daughter, but instead, their transgender son. Initially, when I told them about these feelings of mine, well, I wrote them a letter because I was very afraid of how they would respond to this. And so I wanted to give them some time to think about it, some space, before we finally came together as a family and talked about it. They had a lot of mixed feelings about it. They being my parents, knew how I was created in my mother's womb. They knew that I was not a boy, that I never would be a boy, and they certainly did not want to push me down any path that would lead to me being altered forever. They wanted to let me be a kid, as any responsible parent would. But they also wondered, where are these feelings coming from? What if this comes from a deeper place? What if this is something related to, I don't know, there could be something that is causing this. But we have no idea. We have never dealt with this with any of our other older children before. So we're going to seek counseling, which is a natural conclusion, I think. They assumed that, well, if we have her see a counselor, they're going to give her the help that she needs. And what that's going to look like is probably going to be teaching her how to cope with these feelings in the meanwhile in a way that is age appropriate and allowing her to express herself through her clothes, through her style, through the way that she carries herself and the world around her. They had no idea what was coming for them. They had no idea that they wouldn't even be allowed in the room during these appointments. That the doctors wouldn't communicate with them about what was being spoken about. So they decided that we're going to take matters into our own hands and speak to the psychologist ourselves. We're going to ask them, what is going on with our child? Why can't we hear about what you're speaking about together? How can we help her if we aren't empowered by knowing what she's going through? And why does she want this so bad? Why does she believe she's a boy? Why does she think that in order to be happy, she needs to undergo these major medical procedures? Why can't we just allow her to grow up? And if we said yes, what are the odds that she's going to regret it or be hurt? All very reasonable questions from my mom and dad. But what they were told was that I already knew what I wanted. That children already know what their gender identity is from a very young age, often as early as toddlerhood. That this wouldn't just be a phase, that this was who I was. And if they didn't go along with it, the doctors told my mom and dad that they would very likely have to choose between having a dead daughter or a living, happy, thriving transgender son. And this is a lie that was not drilled into them just once, but at every single step along the way. During therapy, before I was put on the puberty blockers, before the testosterone, and especially before the surgery. But I wasn't suicidal. I was not even at risk of suicide before I went on these treatments. I was depressed, I was lonely, but I was determined to find a better life for myself and to make friends and to be happy one day. I never wanted to die until I was put on this path. Now, the medical transition very quickly progressed. Just a few months after I started seeing therapy was when I was given the prescriptions for my first few treatments, the puberty blockers and testosterone. I received my first doses of both at the age of 13, before I had even finished middle school. Because the drugs were so powerful, by the time that I entered my high school career, I already looked like and sounded like and even had a deeper voice than pretty much all of my natal male peers. They knew me, for the most part, as a young man named Leo. And that's how I lived most of my adolescence. At first, I thought I was happy. I thought that I was living the life I truly was destined to. I was making new friends. I was living under a new identity. I could throw away the shame of my pre-adolescence, of my past, all the difficulties of growing from a little girl into a woman. Or so I thought. I thought I could outrun reality. I thought that I could outrun the way that I was created. But I couldn't. The more that I passed as a member of the opposite sex, the more it reminded me of who I truly was. And with that, the weight of the lie that I was living every day was starting to bear too much on my shoulders. I started to withdraw. I started to give up on my grades, on school, even just on cleaning my room and looking after the people around me. And I wondered, why aren't I happy? Why aren't I happy? Everything that the doctors said would happen has happened. I'm being accepted. I look like I'm a real young man. Why aren't I happy anymore? I thought that I had to continue chasing. I thought that I had to continue the cycle of addiction. So I looked at myself. I looked at my body. Even though I hid my breast every day with a breast binder, they still were there. Every shower, every time I woke up. So I thought, maybe I just haven't gone far enough. Maybe I need to get rid of this next, and I'll finally be happy. And the doctors obliged. I had surgery, a double mastectomy, just after my sophomore year of high school. The choice I thought would make me the happiest I'd ever be in my life ended up bringing me great grief and panic. I was only 15 years old. I was sickly, I was riddled with complications and fighting off feelings of regret. I thought that I was done for. But when I least expected it, God came into my life and transformed everything. I was having so many personal revelations at once. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. It was so disorienting, just 11 months after surgery, realizing that, in fact, I was being abused by the medical system. This new life that I was promised was bringing me closer to death than I ever was. What I really wanted after all was to be loved as a feminine woman, to one day take upon the responsibilities of being a wife, of having children of my own. And I wanted to completely shed the sickly lifestyle that I was living. At 16, I once again faced the world and declared that I was going to reject the lies that I was sold and return to the way that God had beautifully created me. Once again, I would embrace my identity as a young woman, and I was Chloe. It became clear to me that this wasn't my doing. There really wasn't a whole lot of credit that I could have given to myself. This was God's hand moving my life out of harm's way. Through the compassion of the Christian men and women around me, I discovered in the end that it was Christ who saved me. I had a lot of misunderstandings before about what spirituality, what religion, what God really meant. I was raised in a secular home. My mother and father, though raised with a faith background, didn't really give me the same. And they were of the mindset that They wanted to allow me to form my own worldview, my own beliefs about the world, about myself. And I think this is a common sentiment amongst a lot of parents in their generation. But what they don't realize is that when you stop taking your child to church, when you stop teaching them the wisdom of the Bible, you're robbing them of a moral and spiritual foundation that they otherwise would have carried with them as they grew up and through the rest of their lives. My mom and dad didn't know better. I truly believe that in my heart. They did the absolute best they could for me. But with this big hole in my soul and in my heart, I began to ponder in my adolescence whether I was born to be hated, to suffer, to eventually just die with no meaning. But once I became spiritually sober and the walls of transgenderism were knocked down, I realized that my suffering was by my own hands. It wasn't God. But He allowed me to suffer because I had to learn. I had to learn through it. He knew that I could overcome and be transformed through Him. And for years, transgenderism filled that void in my life, in my heart, where Christ should have been. But it turned out that I was just chasing a false idol. I was chasing my own desires, worshiping myself rather than the will of God. But that nearly killed the woman standing before you today. My experience mirrors that of many in my generation. And not just because there are thousands of other detransitioned men and women out there. Beyond the gender crisis, there is a common crisis plaguing people my age. For many of us, our sense of identity, meaning, purpose, and ideals has long been lost. It's not transgenderism that started that confusion, though. It's simply downstream of a deeper brokenness in our culture. The ideas that led to gender ideology also remolded things like relationships and sexuality into something no longer sacred. Framed marriage as not just an option, but a burden on everybody, rather than the basic building blocks of our families and our society. And it treats bodies, human bodies, like they're Barbie dolls that you can just take parts off of, rather than flesh and blood that houses a soul. But this is just the natural consequence of a culture ripping out the pages from its rulebook. This is what happens when we tear up our Bible and forget about its teachings. I am not an outlier. The thousands of stories like mine are the logical products of adults trading reality for worldliness. Adults who forgot the valuable lessons of thousands of years of divine teachings. Because the world that we live in today has made it far too easy to break away from basic truth. And when I realized this for the first time, I was livid. I agonized over the mistakes of the adults around me. I was righteously angry at my doctors for forfeiting their oath to do no harm, leaving me permanently maimed and with my innocence in the last years of my childhood gone forever. I absolutely resented my mom and dad for not saying no to them. But whether my feelings were justified or not, when I chose to turn my back on my family, it left us alone. It left me alone and them. That choice served nobody. It only hurt me and my mom and dad. And yes, they made mistakes. But what did it fix for me to respond in anger? There have been adults in, I think, everybody's life who could have done better, who chose to turn the other cheek in times of trouble. But there were many more with good intentions who simply were unequipped to help. And my mom and dad were only doing the best with what they had at the time, which wasn't much. Once I realized that every single generation of adults is simply trying to fix the mistakes of the last, I forgave them. After all, I learned that every single one of us is commanded to honor our mothers and fathers. So I chose grace, and our relationship, though imperfect, and it always will be imperfect because we're human, has gone through immense healing. And of course, no matter how bad things seem to get, nobody is incapable of being redeemed. I certainly wasn't, even though I thought so for years. I was determined to turn my life around from just being some high school dropout who nobody knew anymore, who no longer had friends, had a substance abuse problem, and compromised health. Now, I was never particularly great at speaking, let alone communicating with people around me. Like, group projects and class presentations in high school were the absolute bane of my existence. If I went back in time and told my 15-year-old self, hey, one day you're going to be speaking in front of dozens, actually hundreds, sometimes thousands of people at once, she would have probably started screaming and running away. She'd be hiding under a table right now. But something compelled me to transform all of these experiences I've been through, the good and the bad, the pain that my family and I went through, into a weapon to cleave away at the evil forces in this world. I thought I was alone. I thought that my story was unique. And unfortunately, it wasn't. It turned out that there's thousands of children out there who have been hurt by these radical ideologies. But the voices of an entire generation have come together to drown out the predators, the mutilators, and the liars. Thousands of parents who wrestled with their struggling children or lost their children entirely cried out for justice. Dozens of brave physicians and psychologists and counselors put their careers on the line to blow the whistle on the abuses that were happening in their practices. And while many of those in power turned a blind eye to our cries, many more have listened, including our current presidential administration. Years ago, I wouldn't even have thought that possible. This ideology is something that preys intentionally on the natural innocence of our children. It preys on the normal insecurities that come with being a teenage girl, around your rapidly changing body, around puberty, around the responsibilities and burdens that come with being a woman. It systematically attacks every aspect of society, reality, and biology that is involved in the creation of life, a task that us women were given to by God. It facilitates the chemical and surgical castration of young girls and women. It removes our breasts with which we nourish our children. And children and young people whose families disagree with transition are strongly pressured to abandon them, to go no contact with their parents who, most of the time, understand and love them more than anybody else in the world. And a lot of mothers have been fighting an uphill battle against this ideology in their own homes. Many have lost custody of their children. Some have experienced the death of their children, to suicide, to regret, to medical complications. it's become clear that what this ideology is completely destructive. It destroys life at its very beginning. But we found the remedy. We must reinforce stable families. We must foster life and sustain it in the most healthy, natural way. And because so many have woken up, there has been massive change worldwide. Over 26 states across the country have put in protections for children under the age of 18 for puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. Recently, a decision by the Supreme Court has determined that these bans are well within the Constitution. Can you imagine being one of the founding fathers, knowing that one day our laws would be used to justify the abuse of children throughout our country? Several executive orders have targeted gender ideology, some instituting a federal definition of male and female, others defunding abusive children clinics, leading to the shutdown of 4 major gender clinics, including here in Los Angeles. There are federal organizations that I honestly would never have expected to get involved in the fight. Like the Federal Trade Commission is launching an investigation against these practices. And one major win that is very dear to me personally is Kaiser Permanente, my healthcare provider, choosing to pause transgender surgeries on minors nationwide. And we have a lot of upward movement to go, but we also have so many victories to go, including here in California. I don't know about you all, but I am sick of California being a scapegoat. I never want to be asked, hey, so when are you moving out of California? Why don't you come to the South? Like, it's, I've been to many places across the United States in the last few years, and it's all beautiful, but no, I'm not moving to Florida. I am not going to Texas, and I am certainly not living in Tennessee. I'm sorry. Because of my advocacy journey, I have been to many of these places that these people speak of. And it's something that has really reinforced my love for our country, just seeing all of the different climates, landscapes, people, food, culture. I mean, it's almost like you wouldn't know just how eclectic America is without seeing it for yourself. But more than anything, it's reinforced my love for California. I mean, there's a reason why we're all here today and we're still living here, right? It can't be as bad as people say it is. And really, sure, we have some crazy leadership, we have some crazy laws, and we've gone downhill quite a bit in the last decades, but it's still beautiful. It's still a place that deserves to have people like us fight for it. And we're going to save California. I believe it in my heart and soul. And it's amazing to see so many people who believe the same and who are willing to fight alongside me. Thank you. If there's anything that I want you all to take away from this, it's that big changes in our world and in our communities, that starts small. It starts with everyday people like us. And yes, there has been a lot of evil happening in the last decade, a lot of darkness. But we have exposed it. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And if there are enough of us banding together, we can expose the evil in this world for what it is and rip it out by the roots for good. At the end of the day, though, we must strive not just to fight, but to let everything we do be done in love. For the sake of our families, for the sake of our children, for the sake of our communities, and for our country. Thank you all. Thank you all for the support. Thank you all for being here and for listening to my testimony.
Before you step down, Chloe, I'd like you guys to see what she looked like before. So if you'd bring up those pictures. Yeah, number 2.
A lot of things have changed since then, but that dog's still my baby today. She kept me through some hard times.
Number 3. All right.
That was me just the day after surgery. You can still see the surgical markings in the bandage.
But look at her now.
Thank you all.
Great job, Chloe. Thank you so much. God bless you.
And God bless you all.
You get to meet her afterwards, all right? She's going to stay afterwards and share with you up front later on. So thank you, Chloe. God bless you.